Guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, episode 82. And of course, this is the grand final episode. Of course, last week, Sydney Swans and Brisbane Lions prevailed. They will be in the 2024 grand final. Of course, we'll be doing a massive breakdown of the grand final, as well as a couple of news updates. Going to be taking a look at the Brownlow, which would have already happened by now. And we'll be grading the teams that have been eliminated from the final series. So let's roll the intro, guys, and get straight into it. And then Rankin from the pocket. Don't tell me, Isaac Rankin!
Yeah.
He's just got the license for a brothel.
Well, I think Gather Round's going to be more than just AFL this next season.
It's at the handle at the back. Nick Dankos to get the pies home. He's done it! So guys, my brother has begrudgingly decided to join us this week. Of course, if you don't remember, he was on the stream, sitting there stewing. He was pretty angry at Port Adelaide's performance on the weekend. If you had to have a little review on Port Adelaide's performance, how would you put it?
Oh, the final series has been below par.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, Hawthorns was a really good game, but obviously that was the response game.
But that was a response game. And like most people thought it was our grand final, and Port Adelaide's performance, pretty much for the both qualifying and prelim were both not much. We didn't put a foot forward.
I thought Port Adelaide didn't fire a shot against Sydney. I felt like, especially late in that throughout the last quarter, I feel like Sydney gave them a chance.
Yeah.
Because they weren't like putting the foot on the pedal. I thought if Port Adelaide kicked, they did kick one goal, I think, and got it back to about 30 odd points, and everyone was like, "Oh, here we go, Port Adelaide are going to do something," and then Sydney just didn't even do much. Port Adelaide just didn't really.
They didn't believe
do anything.
Port Adelaide. They didn't believe that they could actually get back into the game.
Well, it's hard to believe when you bomb long high for
that's
Radicalier and Dixon. Hope for the best.
That's what I didn't get. Like Radicalier, he's not a backman. And to be honest, he's not a forward.
Yeah,
he can't play either position. Forward, he just it seems like they just try to makeshift a position for him because they paid so much money. Because they paid us some money for him.
Yeah.
So it made no sense. Dixon looks done.
Yep.
Which is what Port Adelaide are considering over the next couple of days. So we'll probably hear by sometime during the week that he's probably retired.
Yeah.
I think if it's Port Adelaide, I'd be the strong and just say, we don't need you next year. We're putting it all on Ollie Lord.
The problem that I think actually people have mentioned, the reason why Ollie Lord didn't come into the team is because he wasn't playing well in the SANFL either. So that's the reason why.
I do get it, but it's like, at least he would have put up...
He could have done what Dixon did.
He could have done what Dixon did. Dixon did nothing for those two finals that he played in, and the final that he didn't play in, we won.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, Radicalier, besides that game against the Swans, he didn't kick a single goal for the past 6 weeks.
Yeah. And that game against the Swans, everyone was
everybody could kick a goal in that game.
Yeah.
Like it was beyond. And I wouldn't like to say this because most Port fans don't like to say this, but our best hope was Todd Marshall, and he got concussed in the semi.
Yeah.
So that was our best hope, and once he went down.
Well, there's been talk over the last couple of days that Ken Hinkley may potentially walk away. I could see a world where he does. I don't know. I mean, I feel like he loves the club, but there's been so much scrutiny over him throughout the year. Yeah. It would take a toll on him. And does he really want to go into next year with no contract, which he's not obviously going to get? So
the thing is, he knows it's his last year. Does he think, well, if I take it now, I'll get something? Yeah. And the thing is that the only hope for Port Adelaide next year is Ollie Lord and Mitch Georgiadis in that forward line and Will Arioli. Everything else, nothing works. Like Horn Francis, you can't say that he's a permanent forward.
Well, he's going to be in the midfield next year. You think after another pre-season as well.
You think you just need something to go differently. Like if the players that are linked to Port Adelaide, are they going to make Port Adelaide better?
Well, I think on the other side of it, I know you're making a lot of points of like the negatives, but at the end of the day, they, on their list side, on all that sort of stuff, they shouldn't have been 1 in second position and 2 in a prelim final. For what they've got on them, they overachieved this year, I think. And I mean, and even last year as well, they got to a semi-final when in a top 4 position, even though they had less than they did this year.
Yeah.
So I do think there's some upside for Port Adelaide. I think I know everyone likes to put it on Ken. I feel like there's not many other coaches around that could have done better than what he did. And I mean, I think that at the end of the day, I think that Port Adelaide have actually had a really good year. We'll get to it in a minute with the gradings, but yeah, I feel like it's not all doom and gloom, but I do think their final series again has been another poor one.
I think we overachieved, but there's so many holes in that list.
Yeah,
all we have to look at is that forward line, and all we have to look at is that back line.
The fact that
back line that look like you lose a few players, and Port Adelaide look done.
The reason why they picked up Zerk Thatcher and Radicalair last year was to fix up their defence, and Radicalair was chucked it forward, and obviously couldn't perform. And Zerk Thatcher's been okay at times, but also has been poor at times as well. And Alira has been by far their best performer, which I mean, fair enough, but also he's been there for years.
But it's like you look at that Bergman, Lockie Jones. He has some good games. He has some bad games. Houston being suspended the last 5 weeks. Would that change in the finals if he played?
Farrell as well.
Being out in the finals, would that change something?
I still think their forward line's their biggest issue.
You look at that forward line and you think McEntee, Francis Evans, they don't get a game in any other AFL list. In a lot of AFL lists in the top 8 that finish there.
Well, especially the top 8.
They would not have got a game.
Yeah, and I think you could definitely build off. They can build around. They can pick up a few players like Joe Riches as an option. There's other couple of players that are looking to move clubs at the end of the year or have been delisted. Like I know, obviously, this is a Jack Martin, whatever. He's going to stay in Victoria, but that would be an option. I feel like Jack Lukosius. I feel like they don't really need him, but also he could play as a halfback. But
they can play him halfback. They can play him half forward. He can play most roles in that side. And say you get rid of Houston, you've got looking at Perryman, Lukosius. They're a good option to play either side of the ball.
But again, I don't think either of them are pushing them towards a premiership.
They're not A graded. Well, I wouldn't even call Lukosius an A grade at the moment. The way that could change because of a different environment.
His potential is an A grader. Yeah.
But he's not playing that way at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really expect to go into a Port Adelaide breakdown of their year. But anyway, I guess I didn't mind that. There was a couple of news stories throughout the week, but the main one that I just recently found out, which just shocked me to my core. Did you hear about Caroline Wilson?
Yeah, I saw that today.
So apparently, obviously, everyone knows now that Kane Corns is going to go to Channel 7, which... Look, I mean, I know some people don't like Kane, but at the end of the day, he's the one who gets the ratings. He's the main reason why Footy Classified is watched. He's the main reason why the Footy Show on Channel 9 is as popular as it is, I think, because the show is all about football, but he's the one who makes either the outrageous take or the take that no one wants to make. So, which obviously gets clicks. He's all going to Channel 7. All of a sudden now, Caroline Wilson's going to be piggybacking off of him and going to potentially Channel 7 next year as well. Why the fuck would they want her? She is one of the most gutter journalists. Yes, I know people are going to have an issue with it because she's a woman or whatever, but I feel like most people just don't like Caroline Wilson anyway. Famous quote from this year, of course. Oh, do you think West Coast aren't going to pick Justin Schofield because he's got tattoos?
Yeah.
I feel like that's a big reason. Shut up. That is not a reason. Anyway, she's obviously a journalist. Now, obviously, with the media stuff next year, there's going to be a huge amount of a revamp and stuff. I've never seen her in a commentary space. I don't think that's where she will be. I would highly doubt it.
Yeah.
She would. I think she's on 3AW, but again, what is she going to do? She's not there for expert comments. I would fucking hate if she's there for expert comments. We don't need her for that. I don't think she's a commentator. I've never heard her do it. So the only one she would be is a journalist, like a reporter. So what is she going to bring Channel 7? Assuming she's going to be going to a show, I'm assuming they're going to have Talking Footy's there. I'm assuming they're going to add a few more. But that's kind of the only ones I can think of. I just think this is a weird option for them to go with. I actually like the idea of picking Kane Corns. I feel like that's a really good idea. He's the new age of media that's, not afraid to say what doesn't want people said and blah, blah, blah. But she's not that, I feel like. I feel like everyone dislikes Caroline Wilson. There's no one that, is defending her when she makes a dumb decision. Like even things like Sam McClure and Tom Morris and Mitch Cleary or whatever. I understand why no one likes them, but I understand why they're there because they do make the trade rumours. Like, the last trade rumour I think that Caroline Wilson made was that Elliot Yeo could potentially leave, and then I think a couple of days later that they ruled that out from North Melbourne. So, she's not that either. She's more on, like, the business, or not even the business side, but all, like, the higher-ups of, like, having connections for presidency and all that sort of bullshit. I just think that that's not the real go for Channel 7. I don't know who's going to go, who's going to stay, but... I don't like the idea, to be honest with you. Anyway, that was from the Herald Sun. So, I mean, it's just other people just jacking off each other's stories. So, who the fuck knows if that's even going to be true? Obviously, the suspension on the weekend. There was Rampy who got away with it. I mean, it was never going to be a fucking week anyway for Zach Butters. They still haven't released the MRO. I don't believe. Oh, hang on, here it is. Here, no, it's not. It's the AFLW. Shh, no one cares.
The Dangerfield hit.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for it.
Yeah,
but
he's off.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I don't know why it's not on the AFL website, but apparently, yeah, he's not going to...
He got a fine for it.
He got a fine for it, which, I mean, he would have got absolutely nothing if it was for the next weekend anyway. But not that it deserved anything anyway. I think it was a pretty... I feel like McCluggage... I feel like it was... He did it, his head did hit the ground, but I feel like he definitely was like... Oh, free kick, and then he was off. I feel like players are going to stop doing that. And I mean, it's very much for players can't like shrug high anymore. Really, I mean they can, but umpires are usually pretty good on it now. Yeah, I say usually pretty because we know what fucking happens. But on the side of it, like that's what the new one is now of players like grabbing their head when they get tackled. Immediately, and it's just that's got to be called out. But then also as well, it's so hard to umpire because players could actually get players who do get serious head knocks. Like I think of Tim Taranto when he got tackled by Bedford, he didn't really have that reaction, but obviously he was concussed and was out of the game.
Yeah, but a lot of them when they do get that hit, a lot of them don't go for their head. If you've seen a lot of them, if they get concussed, they're not thinking, "Oh, my head's got hit." Then
yeah,
they'll just they lie on the
they're
ground.
usually fucking out.
They're normally out, like you saw with Rankin when he got hit. Like,
yeah,
even though
that wasn't really a tackle.
Yeah,
it was more of
wasn't. But you know what I mean. It's like when you get hit, you get that concussion. You normally hit, and you normally are shocked, and you're like, and you.
Yeah, usually you're on the ground. Yeah, usually you're not going to grab your head.
Oh, fuck my head. It's like, not really, no.
Yeah. No, I get that too. That's kind of really all the other news stuff. So all players are fine, like on the suspension front for the grand final. We'll get to the tips and that a little bit later. But of course, tonight when we're recording this, the Brownlow's going on. So congratulations to the Brownlow medalists. We can make a little quick prediction, even though it's already going to be done by now. Who do you think would win tonight? Or who do you think's had the best year on?
Favourites, Paddy Cripps and Nick Dacos.
Draw.
Well, close to a draw. I don't think... do you think it'll be a draw?
Well, I mean, according to Cinch Footy, the last time that both Brisbane and Sydney won a premiership, there was a dual Brownlow medalist. Because in 2012, obviously, they changed it from Joe Watson. Yeah. So, there's an omen there. I feel like it's unlikely, but we haven't had one in a while. Like, I mean, obviously, you say 2012, but really, we haven't had one since 2003. Yeah. So, it's very rare. To be honest with you, though, I think that Patrick Cripps has had a better year than Nick Dacos, in my opinion.
Well, let's be honest. I think whoever actually wins it this year, if it's Lachie Neale, Paddy Cripps, they actually deserved it this year. Yeah. If it's Nick Dacos, he deserves it. I think if it comes down to it...
Who do you think a Smokey could be? Who do you think likes a Smokey?
I think a Smokey, they're saying... I think it could be Caleb Sarong.
Some people have said that, yeah.
I think it's Sarong or Merritt if there's a Smokey.
Well, Zach Merritt is the second ever Boundary Riders medalist. Yeah, so I mean, he's obviously going in with good form.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think the winner will be... I think it'll be Nick Dacos. I think he'll come home strong. Yeah. I feel like, personally, I think it's going to be Patrick Cripps, just because he does get seen a lot. He's kicked a few more goals this year as well.
But I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Dacos when it's Lachie Neale or whatever.
You think Bont wins it?
Nah, I feel like that they had a really poor start to the year, and I don't think he catches back quick enough. And I think there's also a couple of players like Ed Richards who take some votes off him at times.
I think if he doesn't lead by 3 in the last round, he's not going to win it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he polls in that last round.
Yeah, well, I think that you guys already know, so I mean, it's not really we're not going to talk about this much longer, but yeah, I think it will be a very interesting count. I just think that I can't see 2 winning it this year. I feel like, to me personally, I think that Patrick Cripps had a better year. I do think it's very interesting though that the predictions say that Errol Goulden's going to be up at around 20, Heaney's going to be up at around 20, and Warner. So it does show as well that like Cripps, Dacos absolutely carried their teams this year.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like teams like, I mean, I guess Brisbane, but also like teams like up the top, like Geelong, Sydney, Brisbane,
even the Giants, to be honest.
Even the Giants. There's no absolute top poller up there, and even Port Adelaide as well. Like, I mean, I don't think any of them are going to be polling like someone's going to be outrageously in front.
No.
So I do think it's very much now like. It's very, because I mean, obviously for a very, very long time, the Brownlow medalists would always be playing in finals. And I think Gary Ablett was the one who broke that trend when he went to the Gold Coast.
Yeah, I'll say that.
Yeah. But now it's like anyone that really, if you're carrying your team, you're basically a chance to win the Brownlow. Like last year, Patrick Cripps, they did make finals, but they scraped in.
Even though they got to the prelims.
Yeah, but I mean, in the regular season. Lachie Neale as well. Well, not so much Lachie Neale, but there are times as well, like recently, where the team who's, not even, like this year, Patrick Cripps and Nick Dacos are the top 2 for the favourites, and neither of them are, I mean, Carlton went out like at 8th.
Yeah, look at it.
So you couldn't expect, on form of the team, you wouldn't expect Patrick Cripps to get many votes from round like 15 to 24, but he had some really good games to carry. And Nick Dacos as well, like I had a really poor start to the year. And to be fair, I feel like even when we did our Riders Medal, he didn't get many votes in the first 6 or 7 rounds.
No, but in a Brownlow, when they look at the disposals, that's what they'll look at.
Yeah.
The one game I'm looking forward to is the Geelong v North Melbourne game. When North Melbourne got smashed on the field, but Harry Sheasel got like 40 disposals.
Yeah,
who's going to get the 3 votes? I reckon it's going to be Sheasel.
I think don't quote me on this, but I think we gave Tom Stewart the 3 votes in that game. By the way, what we may do, if I still have them on my phone or on an Instagram, maybe I'll go through, if there's like a really bad one, I'll go through and see what we voted.
There's always that one game.
Yeah, I remember Jason or Francis got a 3 voter when he got 13 disposals and did, I think, 1 goal.
1 goal, yeah. Yeah, so there's always that one game that no one knows how the hell they got 3 votes. Yeah. Or like Joel Marty last year when he got subbed out at half-time or something. Was it Joel Marty or was it some other forward for the Swans?
I can't remember. It could have been.
There was one game that he was subbed out at half-time and
yeah, they got
3 votes.
I actually can't remember, but yeah, there were some fucking crazy ones last year, which is why people were like, Lachie Neale didn't deserve it, but I still think he had a pretty good year. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about let's rank the eliminated teams. So give them like a grading. So we actually did this, I did this, a couple of weeks ago when we went in, the other 10 teams, the eliminated teams, obviously were out. Most teams got a pretty poor rating, to be honest, because they didn't make finals. I think the best one was Fremantle, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because they were pretty much in the finals before the last 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah. So we obviously got the Bulldogs, Carlton, Hawthorn, Giants, Port Adelaide and Geelong, who have been eliminated from the final series. We'll start with the Western Bulldogs. Now, I mean, it's a very difficult one, I think, the Bulldogs, because they finished 6th at the end of the day and went out in the first round. So, on one hand, you could say they weren't really expected to do much, even though, people are like, well, they did it in 2016. It's like, yeah, bro, I mean, fucking good on you. I remember, but fucking still.
Yeah, the solely Swan supporters.
Fucking hell. Dan Hanbury getting his fucking leg basically taken out. His career basically ended at that point, but it wasn't even a free kick.
Yeah.
Fucking umpires. No, I'm not going to say that was the main reason, but it was still a fucking contributor. Anyway. Not that I hate... This isn't the reason why I'm giving them this grading, by the way. That's not the reason for it. I will explain it. I'm going to be giving the Bulldogs, and I know this is a tough one, I'm going to be giving them an F. Because I think I know this is a Kane Corns thing to say, but they have one of the best lists in the competition, one of the most stacked forward lines, a very good defence now, obviously a stacked midfield, and an All-Australian ruckman. These team should be competing for the top 4 and they should almost be at the grand final this weekend. But they fumbled around at the start of the season. They had that high period as well, like in the mid-season to the end, like they usually do. And they dropped, and when they were tracking to potentially even make the top 4, they dropped games against Port Adelaide when they were at their worst and got smashed, by the way. And then they got smashed by the Crows. Now, I mean, I get that maybe they're not the best at the Adelaide Oval, but also you shouldn't be losing those games. You're a better team than that, and they should be making it. Like, if you look at their list compared to a Port Adelaide, they should not be at 6th position on the ladder getting out in the first round of the finals against Hawthorn, by the way, who, obviously everyone's on the hype train of Hawthorn, but you look at their list, it's still quite thin and young. This team should be fighting for a premiership, and I picked them to be up there this year. Their pass mark would be, I'm pretty sure I said like a prelim final, and they went out in the first round. So I know it's a bit tough to say that because they did finish 6th, but at the end of the day, they were on. I don't know if I'd say I would say it's actually the easier side of the draw on the final side because they had Hawthorn. Now I know Hawthorn were in good form, but they should have really had them done. Hawthorn had an underdone defence. They had their best player, Will Day, out as well. They should have beaten them, but they didn't. They didn't rise to the occasion. They would have had Port Adelaide up next, who was smashed by Geelong. And people are saying that like Hawthorn missed an opportunity to make it into the prelim final. The Bulldogs could have got through that, and then they would have had Sydney, and they beat Sydney earlier in the year. So they could have easily gone all the way through, but because Ugle-Hagan had a shocker, they didn't reach the occasion. I know Bontempelli, there was a lot of talk about him playing midfield. He didn't much in the second and third quarter. End of the day, I think it's a pretty big failure of a season. It's another year that the likes of Bontempelli's get another year on him. That luckily they've got Norton, Ugle-Hagan, and Darcy to grow off of now because how good a year they had. But another year where they potentially could have had so much more just seems a bit wasted. What would you give them?
I'd give them a C-.
Okay, so
I think you're way too harsh. I really do. Like, you look at their list. Yes, it's fucking stacked. It's fucking stacked. But you got to also think of that. Sam Darcy played an actual pretty much a full year. First time he's done that. Ugle-Hagan, he's really like he's played his second year of finals.
Yeah, I think it'd be his second year.
But yeah, it's like he had such a high of his season. He was always going to have that game. He could have always had that game still as a young player. You're looking at that midfield. I don't care what that. Yeah, that midfield. It's one of the best in the league. But let's be honest, if English, he got injured late in the year. Bontempelli, they're not going to say it, but he's probably injured. If they're going to play him at half forward during that final, he's either injured or it's just not good enough, really.
Yeah.
That defence, you can't. It was kind of makeshift. Like, let's be honest, Rory Lobb going back late in the year.
I think it performed well though.
That was a good move, but let's be honest. In another day, he would probably be delisted because he kicked that big bag of goals that week before he went back. He'd probably be delisted by now.
Yeah.
So he's probably lucky he had that game to revive his career.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, he was a makeshift backman.
Yeah.
You look at it, like, besides Liam Jones, like, yes, they're pretty good defenders, but I don't know if you can really win off that. Because, like, you got Buku Kummers, who's in and out of that team. Roy Lobb, who was pretty much revived his career. Dre, he has good games. He's always pretty reliable. Bailey Dale, well, if he gets tagged, he's out of the game and they can't move the ball. Joe Hannison, injured all the time. He hasn't played all year. He hardly played all year. I just don't think that defence can hold up.
So you think they need to go to the...
I think they need to get another big defender.
Yeah.
Because I think you can use that to your advantage with Rory Lobb being the interceptor. And I think that will work. I think they need another pressure forward because I think that Cody Waitman and Riley West, they were good, but
I don't think
Beveridge doesn't want to play him, but didn't want to play West in the final.
Yeah,
that didn't make any sense.
I also think that they're not really the most pressure forwards either.
No, they're not.
I think that they need an actual pressure forward.
Yeah, it's like that. Like they tried James Harms as bringing him in that game. I think he didn't really do anything. I think besides that midfield, I think that forward line has a lot of promise because they've got the three tools. But I think I can't give them a D or an F. I don't think it was you can say it was a failed year, but they did make the finals.
Yeah, well, I think they could have done a lot more. That's why I give them an F. I had them expectations of top 4 and whatever, and they didn't get there. So I get what you're saying, though. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. Next one, we get to Carlton. Now, this would be an F. I'm going to give them an E because of all the injuries they had at the end of the year. Because this should have been... I mean, they were up there with premiership favourites halfway through the year.
If it wasn't for Sydney at the same time having that downfall, it could have been they would have had a lot more heat on them.
Yeah. I feel like at that point... Well, I think it was around the point when Sydney lost by 112 against the Power. Carlton were in a pretty bad slump as well, but no one really talked about it, which, it's fair enough. Swans are on top of the ladder, and they were the best team for that at that point of the year. But I'm going to give them an E because their injuries absolutely decimated them. Like, you saw that team they played against West Coast the week.
If they played anybody else in that game, they would have lost.
They would have been thumped.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to give them an E. I feel like that they'll bounce back next year as long as they can keep the players on the field. I think they have a lot of promise. I feel like if they can get a player like a Dan Houston from Port Adelaide and could build their list a little bit more. I'm a little bit surprised that they're going to be getting rid of Matt Owie so quickly. Or letting him go. Like, he kicked 30 goals this year, and he's like the only other option who, other than Mackay and Curnow. Yeah. And then also Kennedy, I thought was a weird one as well. I thought like he's like he plugs a hole for you. So I thought it was a bit weird. But I still think that they had a really good start to the year, obviously. They were second for premiership favourites for a lot of the season.
To be on, from the bye till the bye around that area.
If they didn't have all those injuries, it'd be 100% BNF. The fact that they finished, they fell into the finals and they got smashed. They got smashed by Brisbane in the first half. The game was done. Yeah. It would be an F, but the fact is that I know it's an excuse, but I feel like injuries just decimated their season. So I think an E is pretty fair for them. What would you go with?
I think I'd give them a D. Yeah. I think, they got hit by injuries, but you've also got to think that game style they play is just to bomb it long and hope for Mackay and Curnow. Let's be honest.
That has never changed.
That has never changed, and I think that if they got to find some small forwards, and Matt Owie's exploring. I don't think it's the right move.
I was surprised they did that.
And so now they've got planning on getting rid of him, getting rid of Matt Kennedy. They're going to keep and Jack Martin could be out the door as well.
Yeah, he's been delisted, so he's gone.
So what they've got up forward? They've got Jesse Motlop. Tulvani's still there, so because he's been injured all season.
Corey Durden.
Well, I think I would have played Matt. I think I would have said to Corey Durden to get out the door.
Lockie Fogarty as well. I mean, are they names that you're going to be like, they're going to kick us 30 goals next year?
Yeah, I couldn't see either him or Durden kicking 30 goals.
Yeah.
Or 40 goals combined, to be honest.
It just feels like, obviously you think about like Eddie Betts, like 3 or 4 years ago retiring. They're obviously trying to pick up Tom Papley right back then. They really haven't explored another option. Like, they picked up Fantasia, but that was a delisted.
That's a 2-year deal, easy. Like, he was only going to last 2 years.
Yeah. So I just don't know what's next. I feel like Carlton can bounce back. Like, I think that's fine, but they need to hit this trade period and need to look I feel like their midfield obviously brilliant. I think defense is one of the best.
The one thing for their midfield is that it's got to be Elijah Hollands and his brother. They've got to get more game time in that midfield because they need that spark. Because they're great, Cripps, Hewitt, Walsh, but they need that spark.
Kind of one pace, do you think?
Yeah, I think you could say it's one pace, but yeah. I think they need something there. They need another couple small forwards. And
you think they're back?
Their backline's pretty good. Maybe another.
Yeah, I don't think their backline needs. I mean, I think Dan Houston, if they pick
it
him
might
up,
be.
great.
Yeah, what you look at that. To be honest, do they really need him? Like, look at that. Look at Nick Newman, Sard.
Well, I think that would release
Doherty.
one of them to play on someone. They could play on someone while Dan Houston could go. But I think Houston could play on a wing as well.
Yeah, I think. To be honest, yeah, you can move one of them up to the wing, but I just think that.
You want to keep.
I don't know what they need another. Yeah, that would be nice, but it's like they needed. I think they need another big defender. I think it's Wiedering, and is it going to be McGovern? Is it going to be Lewis Young? Who is it going to be?
Well, Lewis Young's been told to explore his options too.
Yeah,
so
well, who knows?
They've also said as well. I heard this on the Dan Does Footy podcast that Carlton are potentially looking at Mitch McGovern playing forward next year to play as a third, and then Brodie Kemp, I guess, would go back. But I feel like they should just explore Kemp playing forward. I mean, he played decently in those couple of games. I mean,
against a shit ass West Coast, yeah. Well, that's a good.
Well, I know, but I mean, give him a go. Like, he has had forward experience in his past.
Yeah, they've got to really just set up their team what they want it to be for week one of pre-season. So you never know. We could be saying week 3 of next year they look great, but they did that this year and they looked pretty good to the bye, and they just crumbled up under injury.
Yeah. Next is Hawthorn.
That's an A+.
A+.
Yeah, we don't need to keep talking.
They were brilliant this year. I know people can say, I know, what was it, Kane Corns in his review said that they were, what was it, an A- or something, or a B? Yeah. Because they had their runs, they had the best chance to make a prelim. I don't care. I mean, at the end of the day.
No one expected them to be outside the bottom 4 at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, so, I think I had them like 13th or something, but I did think they were going to be a riser, but no one expect, especially from 0 and 5, to get to where they are
to a semi-final when no one thought they would.
Yeah, exactly, and the evolution of all they did off the field as well. I know that it's going to be not very long before we start hating them, but A+.
Just enjoy it for the moment.
Yeah, just enjoy it.
Fans.
Yeah,
we love you at the moment. Give it a couple of years, we'll hate you again.
I feel like next year is going to be pretty. I feel like we'll be off them. GWS. Interesting. They obviously they were like a premiership favourite going into the finals for a lot of people. They lost their first game against Sydney in a heartbreaker. People thought they could go the long way, and then they lost again. And now Brisbane, who beat them, are in the grand final. Yeah. It's tough. I feel like I'd give them I don't think it's a D, because I feel like that I feel like there was a part of me that felt they were going to fall off a little bit this year, and they went back up, so I was fine with that. I'll probably go like a B-. I feel like that they still have I still feel like they have a couple of holes in their team. Like, I feel like their midfield is just starting to be a little bit, there's just not enough depth through there, I feel like. I know that's may have been an interesting one, but I feel like they've got Kelly, Green, Callahan looked good this year as well.
Bedford going in there.
And Bedford played as a tagger, but yeah, I just think that they could use an extra midfielder or so. That's just me. I think the forward line could probably use an extra tall. I mean, the fact is that Hogan was playing, like, obviously he was brilliant. Like, you can't deny that. But the fact is that Riccardi was there for a lot of the year. And then they played Lockie Keefe, who, by the way, could have sealed both of the finals. He had two opportunities he had an opportunity in both games to seal them. He didn't do it. Yeah, I feel like that's the couple of things that they're missing. But the fact that I'm not going lower than a B- is because they were extremely good for a lot of this year. And the fact is they were premiership favourites for a lot of it. But at the end of the day, the fact is they're not higher than that, because they should have been in the prelim at the very least. Yeah. At the very least, they should have been in the prelim.
Finishing top 4, you should just go for the prelim.
Well, the fact that Port Adelaide made... I don't know, I keep on bringing up Port, but the fact is that if Port Adelaide made the prelim after such a demoralising loss in that qualifying final, I just think that... I know people say their game plan's like too hard to maintain, which I get it, but also I feel like that's going to win you a premiership, that game plan as well. They just need to build their fitness. I feel like if that's... if they can maintain that for 4 quarters, or even just maybe they should have just give up on the first quarter instead of like dominating the first quarter, just bring it in the second and then they run home. But there's obviously huge upside for the Giants. They could even be a premiership favourite for me going into next year. We're up there. But for me, going out in straight sets, after being a premiership favourite, I feel like a B-. Yeah. What are you thinking?
I think I'd say a C+, to be honest. I had them premiership favourites.
Yeah.
And besides the fact, like, they had a few injuries. Caniglio was a big one. Kelly, throughout the year, was also a big one. I think Toby Green had such a down year.
I know, he kicked 41 goals, but you're like,
it just seems like, it seems like he didn't have the spark like he normally would. The emergence of Brett Daniels in the second half of the year, I thought was brilliant to see. I think Tom Green, he was in and out for most of the year, out of form.
I feel like after he got his injury early in the year, there was a middle season period where he just didn't hit his straps. Yeah. I think towards the end of the year, he did start to get back into it. Toby Bedford obviously was a great inclusion to play as a tagger, and I think he could definitely improve that craft next year as well.
The one thing I think that needs to change from the Giants is that Lachie Whitfield has to have more impact on a game, because he can have 40 disposals all he wants, but if he gets less than 5 score involvements, it means nothing.
He's got to start watching Dane Zorko's tape.
Yeah, I think he can use the ball so well with Whitfield, but if he doesn't have any scoreboard impact on it, it means bugger all. Yeah. And the thing is that the Giants, if he can get it to Jesse Hogan throughout with 40 disposals, if he can hit Jesse Hogan 10 times, that's 10 goals. He's a very accurate kid.
Well, I think as well, like you look at the 2 grand finalists. Nick Blakey, when he gets those touches, he hits them inside the forward 50 as well.
Yeah.
And you look at Dane Zorko as well on the other side of it. Geelong even. I feel like maybe a Whitfield move to the wing, maybe an option.
I think him being at halfback, I think having him up the field, getting him more involved off the back of a stoppage, let him run through, he can hit your target.
Yeah.
I think he needs to just have more impact on a game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think that's what lacked a lot in that second half of the year. That if you have against the Crows, he had 40 plus, but he had like only 3 score involvements. It's like you can't have that
if you're touching it 40 times, you should be the top score involvement player on the ground.
Yeah, and you look at Brett Daniels, pretty much he had. Some days he had 22 disposals, and somehow he'd have 11 score involvements.
Yeah,
it was amazing how quickly just the small amount of having half the less disposals as Whitfield, and he can have double or triple the score involvements.
Yeah, the impact on the game. So C+, B-. Yeah. Okay, next up, we get to... Is it Port Adelaide? Oh, it's Port Adelaide. Alrighty. I'll let you go first. What do you think Port Adelaide's ranking for the year?
I'd say a B.
Okay.
It's the same, but it's the same old stuff with Port Adelaide. They have such a great home and away season. When it gets to the finals and the hard part, they don't match up. And I'm not gonna blame it on the injuries late in the season, but I think the biggest one was the Dan Houston hit. Him being out was a big hit for Port Adelaide, and he should have done it, obviously. But
you knew they were going into a final series. Maybe just pull off from that.
Yeah, it was the worst time for Port Adelaide to do it, and then the next week Farrell gets injured.
Yeah.
2 players with elite foot skill didn't help. Dixon, too old. I don't think he should have went on after last year. He should have retired then. But there's not a lot of depth in that team.
Yeah. Like
you look at it, like you saw in the forward line. Radiclear couldn't catch a cold. McEntee and Francis Evans couldn't bring much pressure at all, if at all.
Yeah.
The 3 upsides of that whole team was having Georgiades back in form, Logan Evans from the mid-season draft, and Jace Burgoyne.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want with that. Like, you can put him back to halfback Burgoyne. He played brilliantly in the final series. Him and Boak were pretty much... Burgoyne was the best finals player for Port Adelaide. and you give him whatever money he wants. He was
All right.
like, I'm being serious. Like you pay him whatever he needs.
You're gonna make him Port Adelaide's $1 million player.
Well, they're gonna give it to Jason Hall-Francis, but that's not the point. But he was the best player of the final series, and his second half of the year, if Port Adelaide are to make finals, he needs to play a big role. And if he does next year, he could be All-Australian.
Okay, that's a big
But
call.
Port Adelaide, the three pieces of the puzzle they need to fix up is an actual defender, big defender, small forwards, and they need some more squad midfield depth in that team.
Yeah,
it's a bit of I don't know. What would you say, spark or a bit of? I don't
actually mind Port Adelaide's depth through the midfield, but I do think that because I think that they've got enough there to roll through enough. Like I think they've got 6 or 7 good midfielders. I think that's enough.
I think it's more of a wingman. I think it's that.
Yeah.
It's because it's like you look at it. It's like you lose Houston, you chuck Burgoyne back, but you didn't have the extra player because you lost Farrell as well. So you lost Farrell and Houston. You chuck Burgoyne back. To be honest, Burgoyne looked fucking brilliant back there during the final series.
Reminded me a lot of Wangadine, Melorifus and Kilda.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me a lot of. And it's like, to be honest, I'd leave Burgoyne there.
I think you would too.
Farrell up. It's like.
I mean, maybe. I think that's a lethal left footer. Like we've seen the likes of Errol Goulden as like how good a kick he is inside the forward 50.
Like,
so
it just seems like the only other option that they've used over the final series is they put like a Boak or a Wines with a resting midfielder out the wing. It's like,
and it's like, look, I mean, Boak obviously had a lot of mistakes in the Swans game, but I still think he was one of their better players in the final series as well. And I think that's a big call as well. Like he's 36, he shouldn't be their best player, one of their better players.
But it's not a position that you need your most experienced player that's a midfielder out there. You need a fast player to keep the spread of the ground, and if a player needs an out, they've got the run to run all the way into the forward line.
Yeah, run between the arcs.
Yeah.
With Port Adelaide, I'm going to give them a B+. I'll give them a B+ because I think that they have overachieved a lot this year. The fact that they even made top 4, that team on paper should be scraping in the 8. Yes. I'm sorry. That forward line was makeshift for the whole final series. The fact that they even beat Hawthorn was amazing to me. But the fact is as well, it can't be an A in my opinion because that's just they still haven't made a grand final and they had another opportunity and they could have. I don't think they would have beaten Sydney, but they should have given it a lot more of a crack than they did. I feel like in that last quarter, we said it earlier in the episode, but they could have had a real crack at Sydney in that last quarter. They just didn't fire a shot.
No.
So that's why I'm giving them a B+. I think they overachieved quite a lot, and I think if they do add a couple of puzzle pieces in the off season, maybe they can get back to that spot. But I do think that they are. I know people like to put it on Ken, but the fact is they shouldn't have been where they were, and I feel like no other coach could have done it. So I think because of the love that they have for the guy, I think that's a very good season from him. I don't think he could have done much more, but I can't give it any more than a B+. And finally, let's quickly grade Geelong. So I'm thinking it's probably a B+ for me again, to be honest, because I really didn't have a lot of expectations for the Cats this year. I thought they may scrape into the 8, but the fact that they were in the top 4 at the end of the season, they had such a great start, 7 and zip. I feel like they've got a couple more things that they need to fill into this team. And the fact that they still made a prelim final is amazing. The fact that it's not an A is because they didn't... I mean, at the end of the day, that home prelim final, they should have made the grand final. But I think there's a lot of upside for Geelong. I think they're going to be a dangerous team again, fuck's sake. But I think B+. I don't think there's really much else to say. Like, I think they've got so many more attributes going forward next year. If they pick up Bailey Smith, there could be a couple of other players coming through. Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah. Not again. But yeah, I think B+ for me. They had a very good year.
Yeah. I got an A-. Yeah. I think no one expected... Well, you can't really say no one expected them to do what they do because they always seem to do it. Yeah. But with that midfield that they had... Yes, it's a good midfield. The inexperience, I think, was the thing that you just didn't know how they were going to do it.
Well, I think a lot of the young guys that came through, like Tanner Brew and Ollie Dempsey, obviously was amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't expect that from a second year player, first full season under Ollie Dempsey.
Yeah.
You don't expect that, and like the emergence of Sean Manor was the best.
I can talk about him all
day. That was the best story out of anything this year.
Yeah.
Watching his emergence from the VFL Grand Final last year, heartbreak, to one of their best players in that second half of the season.
Yeah, he was amazing. I mean, look, he obviously wasn't going to get All-Australian his first year, but he was a very good half forward for them.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely in a couple of years, who knows how good he could be.
Yeah.
I mean, Geelong players, they pick up a couple of years after or whatever, look at Tom Stewart. He was a couple of years after. Was he a 5-time All-Australian?
Yeah,
Tom
something
Stewart?
like that, yeah.
So, I mean, there's so much upside for Geelong. And, I mean, he's obviously he's young in games, but, he's still got experience.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly, yeah. And you're looking at you got to think about the team, the players that they're losing, obviously, like with Hawkins going, they're bringing in Shannon Neal. You just hope that the players around him will be able to help him develop, because if
he did have a pretty poor game.
Yeah, the final series, he would say it was a poor final series.
Yeah,
but
he's only young.
But he's only young, so you got to think that next year he's had the experience in finals. A full year, hopefully without injury,
a new pre-season as well.
Yeah, and knowing that knowing that he's the man now, that he's going to be the one that's got the mantle.
Yeah.
So it's a bit scary to think where Geelong could finish next year. With the fact is Bailey Smith.
That guy's going to be an A. That guy's an A grader that's never really had a chance.
Like Max Holmes, he was the player for.
He arguably. I think they would have won that game.
Yeah, if he plays the rest of that final, they probably get to the grand final.
Yeah.
The only worry, I think, is that ruck spot. I just don't trust it. They need that? I think that's the only thing that's holding them back at the moment.
Well, I think next year now, I think they've always, throughout the year, they did give Conway a couple of goes, but his fitness just wasn't at the standard yet. I think that Stanley's probably that finals game, the fact is that even though Joe Danaher is a pretty okay for a makeshift ruckman, he should have dominated the rest of that game.
He dominated in that round 24 match, and then he pretty much dominated Sweet in the qualifying final.
Yeah.
So
but the inconsistency of Reece Stanley is just
still there.
I mean, you can probably. Toby Conway's there, but Sam De Koning obviously showed some good signs this year as well.
So he could have come in for that prelim final for someone, but they chose to go with the experienced ruckman. Another pre-season for Sam De Koning being in the ruck.
Yeah,
maybe that could turn.
I mean, Blitzards as well.
Too.
So I think there's a lot of upside. I do think that's their one question mark. Their ruck, but I think they've got enough there that they can definitely fill that up.
So you can't go any lower than a B. So no one really expected them to get this far. A lot of people thought they'd go out in straight sets. Yeah. So for them winning that first final was
being 2 kicks away from a grand final again. I mean, I think they had a good year. But now, guys, none of the fluff. We've already gone 40-odd minutes of fluff for most of yous. Grand final preview, the 2024 grand final. The fairy tale for a lot of us. The first time in, nearly 20 years that we've had 2 non-Victorian teams play in a grand final.
About time.
Sydney Swans against the Brisbane Lions. Well, state of origin as well in the AFL, of course. So, let's go to a couple of questions we'll be doing throughout the final series. I think there's only a few questions really going into this game, but the matchups are going to be what wins and loses this one. And the question marks pretty much sit on the selection front, I think. Do the Swans risk Cal Mills or Logan McDonald? What do you think?
I think they'll risk it more on McDonald than they will Mills.
So obviously Callum Mills, hamstring, usually a 21-day hamstring. He's only going to have 18 days to prove himself. I personally think he'll be named. I don't know if he plays though. I think he'll be named. I think Logan McDonald, at the end of the day, I think he'll be fine. There is a little bit of a concern. He didn't even show up. He wasn't at the open training session. He was in rehab.
No offense, but that's not big of a deal. For me, that's not a big deal. Like they said last week with Lockie Neal and Dane Zorko, they didn't do the first training session of the week because they never do.
And I feel like they weren't really off the pace.
Yeah,
in that game.
yeah. Well, let's be honest. Yeah, they weren't off the pace, but I'm just saying, it's just like it's a big money player. I don't think it's a big deal yet.
Do you think? I mean, the thing is, I think. I know this is very, very harsh, but if Cal Mills wants to prove himself to play in this final, he almost has to risk injuring it at training to just give it a go.
100%.
He needs to be throwing everything at his hamstring and saying, "Okay, I can do this."
Yeah, and as your captain, I'd expect him to do it. I'd expect him to do that.
So you think you will play? You think you'll?
No, I think he'll do everything possible to train, but I don't think he'll get up.
Okay.
I don't think Longmire will do what he did 2 years ago with Sam Reid.
Yeah, and well, in 2016 as well, they mentioned as well that Cal Mills came into that game injured, and even Jared McVeigh came back with little preparation. So I just don't think John Longmire's going to risk that.
No.
Logan McDonald, I think, is a little bit different. It looks like it was just a rolled ankle at the end of the day. That's at worst. Because, I mean, he didn't look too dejected on the bench. Obviously, yes, he was in rehab, but that was Sunday as well. Yeah. So, I mean, let's give it a break a bit. I think Logan McDonald will be fine. I wouldn't be surprised if Cal Mills is named. I just don't think he gets up. And to be honest, I think Sydney should go in with Robbie Fox. I think he's done enough on that. I mean, obviously as a sub, he didn't do a lot, but I do think that he's a good option. And I wouldn't actually be surprised if Sydney actually potentially play him in the game because Brisbane have a lot of small forwards that he could go to. Yeah. Another question mark, Oscar McInerney will be out. Heartbreaking story. Does Darcy Fort get the job? Or do you think they go Joe Danaher or do you think maybe they give Henry Smith a go? I feel like Henry Smith is probably out.
I think he's out of it. I think they will have to go with Darcy Fort. I think they can't afford to play Danaher or whoever makeshift ruckman in a grand final. They can't possibly do it, and especially with Brodie Grundy, who if he on his day he could win the Norm Smith next week. Well, this week. He could win the Norm Smith easily.
I think one thing as well is the fact that, let's say, worst case scenario, Danaher goes down early. And they don't have Darcy Fort there. Yeah. So that means Eric Hipwood's going to have to play at the ruck? I mean, that's another scenario as well. I think what they can do here, which I think will work, is similar to what they kind of did with Oscar McInerney last week with Darcy Fort, obviously without the injury. If Darcy Fort can get through 2.5 quarters to 3 quarters as a ruck, they could potentially sub him out. Yeah. And then Joe Danaher can do the rest. If they have to, and he's like a little bit of, I'm not saying he's a liability, but Grundy will make him run all day. Yeah. So that's something that they could do. I think Darcy Fort's the best option. Yeah.
I think it's the worst position for Brisbane to lose it at this time of the year. Obviously, it doesn't matter what injury or what player it is, but to their ruckman, when they've played only one solo ruck pretty much the whole year, it was the worst time to do it.
Yeah, and his last game was in round 8. Henry Smith has had a couple of games late in the season, but I just don't think they're going to risk a 4th gamer as the key ruckman in the grand final. So I think Darcy Fort's going to get the job. I think he probably knows that too. But a couple of real big stories on the selection front coming through. Let's look a little bit more at the game itself. I think the real talking point of this game is, I think this is where it's going to be won. Which small forwards take the mantle of the game here? Because you got Brisbane, you got Lohman, Cameron, Rayner, and even Logan Morris. For Sydney, you've got Papley, Haywood, and then the resting Heaney you could go up there as well. Parker as well. So, and Sydney's midfield scoring. Whoever gets on top, I feel like will win the game. Now, and the thing is as well, both these teams have the best lockdown small defenders in the comp. Yeah. Starskovich and Cunningham. Now, obviously, neither of them get any sort of credit. Yes. Like, I mean, until now, these sort of players only start to get credit if they go deep into finals. Yeah. Like, you think of Nick Smith in 2012 with the Swans. He was never mentioned before then. I was thinking of the only Swans player, but there are others, obviously. Who do you think both of them will go to? Now, you probably expect Cunningham to go to Cameron, I would say. And then
he's always had the role when they've played recently.
And he's done it pretty well too. And then Starskovich, probably Papley.
I think it has to be. I think it's been very. It's not been talked about enough with him being back in that team. I think Papley being back is what the Swans desperately needed after that downfall late in the year. I think when he went down, a lot of people thought that was it for him because they didn't really have a small forward in that team.
He went down, funnily enough, in the Brisbane game. Yeah. And so we obviously people probably don't remember that game. Sydney probably would have won it, but they had 3 players get injured during the game. It was a pretty warm afternoon up in Brisbane as well. Yeah. So not to say that they would have, but also it was a very close game of footy. They very well could have won that game. I think those are the matchups. Yeah. That's going to be the big one. That will be very interesting, though, what happens with Kai Lohmann, who gets him, because he's been very dangerous this year. Will Hayward, who's going to go to him. You got Rayner as well, of course. That's probably a big one. You mentioned to me before we started. Who do you think goes to Cam Rayner? Because you think Sydney have got Ollie Florent. He usually plays off, likes to run.
To be honest, I think it'll be Melican. I really do.
I think what Sydney will do is they'll send Melican to Hipwood. They'll send McCartan to Danaher. They'll put Rampy on Rayner. And then that will leave Morris, Lohmann. Yeah, Morris and Lohmann. Because Cunningham will also take Cameron. So those two are going to be very interesting matchups. Who goes to them two? So you got Florent, you got Lloyd, you got Blakey. I feel like Blakey will probably go to Morris so he can play off him. So Lohmann's got to be the choice of either it's going to be of that defender of like Lloyd or Florent. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. That's why I almost think Fox could play in the team because I feel like Fox going to Lohmann could actually be a good matchup.
And then you put Campbell as the sub.
I'd almost put Justin McInerney as the sub, but also
I don't think not in that after that prelim. I thought he played pretty well.
Yeah, he probably.
I think there's no way that they'll risk that.
Yeah, it's tough who Sydney would put as the sub because Campbell he had a very good qualifying final. Didn't really do a lot in that prelim
that's
final.
The thing that I think that if they're going to be honest, like you said, I think they would play Fox over Campbell and put Campbell as the sub. Yeah. Or sadly, he would miss for Mills.
I don't think that would happen. I feel like Fox would come in for Mills, to be honest.
Mills
would come for Fox.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's
and then Mills would play on Lohmann. But then, obviously, there's so many selection points that could happen. Let's take a look at the big matchups of the game. James Jordan, what does he do here? Does he tag Dane Zorko, or does he go to Lucky Neal? What do you think?
That'd be stupid if they don't go to Zorko. That'd be
what Sydney did against Brisbane last time was they sent Errol Goulden to him. They made him play off him.
I think, I'm not... But let's be honest, they didn't win that game, did they? I know that there's a lot of other attributes, but I think that you have to stop Zorko because in that... both those finals, in the elimination and the semi-final, if he didn't have those performances, they don't win those games.
You mean the semi and prelim?
No, I mean... No, the prelim was a bit different, but I think Neil's role was there for the clearance battle. But I think the semi-final second half for Zorko getting him back into it, and that elimination final he set it up without anyone being on him.
So I agree with you on James Jordan, and the reason why I'm saying James Jordan goes to Zorko and not forward is because the one thing is Zorko will always let you have a chance as a forward.
Yes.
Which I think would be fair enough if Hayward or a Papley was on him or even an Errol Goulden. But the fact is he does so much damage on the counter that I think that a tagging role for James Jordan is necessary because if you need to... I think Jordan can do enough to kick goals. I think that's fine. He's shown this year when he went up against Jordan Clark that he can score. Yeah. I think in that game against Fremantle in Perth, he had the most score involvements in that game, James Jordan. So he can obviously get himself the ball as well. But he does need to stop Zorko from getting pushed forward. Yeah. So I think that's a fair enough call. I think if Lachie Neale does go off the chain, Rowbottom will go to him as that defensive midfielder and just push him at stoppage, try and push him under the stoppage, don't let him go, basically. So that's what I think will happen for Sydney. That's what I think the best way to go about it is. Now, Luke Parker, I think he goes around Harris Andrews here.
Yeah.
Similar to what he did against Aliir, I think that he does that again.
Yeah, I think that he just has to start on him. I think that they can't do what they did, what they happened last week with Aaliyah, because he just dominated that first quarter.
Yeah, so I think that's what's going to happen. They send Parker straight to him. Very interesting matchup here, which I think won't be talked about by anyone other than us. Fletcher with Golden. I think this is a matchup for his career. Not for his career, but this is going to be his biggest matchup so far, Jasper Fletcher. I thought he played really well last week on Ollie Dempsey, but now you're going up against the best wingman in the comp. So if Fletcher can keep him accountable, so Fletcher can try and get him on the counter, because he showed some good signs last week, Fletcher, on the counter against Ollie Dempsey, and Dempsey didn't have a very good prelim final. So I think it's a very good matchup there. Like we mentioned, I think that Cunningham will go to Cameron. I think that Tom McCartan will go to Danaher.
Yeah.
So I think that's fair enough. But I think the big one as well, Isaac Heaney. What are they doing with Isaac Heaney?
I think it's Josh Dunkley. I don't think it's Barry. I think it's Dunkley.
Okay.
I think he's got the more of the aerobic capacity to stay with him than Barry does.
Okay. So that means you would say Barry or McCluggage stands with Warner?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they have to stay accountable.
I think that Barry will be on him at stoppage and they'll see what happens with the around the ground.
Yeah.
I think that's what they'll do. But I think Dunkley needs to go to Heaney.
And what I've said the last couple of weeks when I've said someone mans up Heaney, and there's something that Sydney are doing so well, which is good, and I hope they continue it, he pushes forward.
Yeah.
And he's done it well, because he did it against Port Adelaide, and Port Adelaide with Willem Drew, they couldn't... Willem Drew actually had a pretty okay game against him. But as soon as he pushed forward...
He was done.
And the thing is as well, Sydney were looking for him forward too.
Yeah.
And that's what they've got to do this week against Brisbane. So I think the biggest matchup of the game is going to be the small forward ones. Cunningham against Cameron and Starskovic against Papley. I think that's going to be the big ones. But this is such a great game. I think actually someone in the comments put this in, and I thought it was a very good point. This is the best team the first half of the year versus the best team the second half of the year. It's going to be a fairy tale for whoever wins it. These are the last two losers in grand finals. What's your tip?
We're going to go Norm Smith as well.
Yeah, we'll go Norm Smith as well.
I reckon the Swans do it. They'll win it by under 2 goals. I'll go to Chad.
You go to Chad.
Smith.
Chad Warner. Alright. I'm going to go Sydney as well. I think it will be I'll say 3 goals. 3 goals. And I'll go with, I know it's an obvious one, but I'll go Isaac Heaney. But I think I would be heartbroken, but I wouldn't be surprised if Brisbane go 4 in a row here and win the game. Because they are fighting for Chris Fagan. They love him. It's like Ken Hinkley 2.0. They want to get him a premiership. They have played so well this year. They would be deserving winners, even though they finished 5th. I think they'd be deserving winners.
Yeah.
But I think we're set up for an almighty grand final.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a great grand final. We will be streaming it here. The game starts at 2 p.m. Adelaide time, so I think it's 2:30 Melbourne time. Don't quote me. I don't even know if it's going to be on. I don't think it's going to be on KO. I think they just show a blind. So I think it's 7 plus. You have to watch it. So if you are wondering, it is going to be on 7 plus, or you can just listen to me commentate it, which I don't know how good of commentating it's going to be, depending on how close the game gets. But we're both tipping Sydney. Grand final for the ages, I think. I think this is going to be a really good game. First non-Victorian teams to be playing in the grand final since 2006. And funnily enough, that was when the Swans played West Coast. Not the memorable grand final. Don't have to worry about that. But anyway, guys, I think that's where we're going to end the podcast for this episode. Thank you for listening to episode 82 of the podcast, the grand final edition. If you did enjoy this episode, make sure to leave it a like on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for 2,000 subscribers. We really do appreciate it. And I will just quickly say as well, I know that we haven't put a video out in the last month or so, but there's been a lot of stuff going on. We've moved place and just the video stuff, especially with the finals as well. I thought probably push out the finals videos is more. But also when the finals does end, we won't be stopping videos. We'll obviously be doing the podcast every single week. Trade stuff will be going forward as well. It's never-ending content here, guys. So don't even worry about it.
There's AFL 24/7.
Yeah, of course.
365.
And what we'll be doing throughout the off-season of the podcast for the AFL, we'll get back to... We stopped it when the season kind of started, which is fair enough. We'll get into a bit of we should talk about Premier League, a bit of NFL as well. Falcons are 1 and 2 at the moment, so don't want to talk about that. Chelsea are doing pretty decent, so we'll talk about them a bit more. And Liverpool are second, so probably a bit about Premier League. But anyway, if you're listening on Spotify as well, make sure to leave us 5 stars and leave us follow so you're notified on the review and the podcast every single week. We'll be doing a review of the grand final. My mood will be a little bit different depending on the result, so stay tuned for that. I think you're going to join me for the review as well.
Yeah, we'll go for the grand final review.
Yeah, hopefully it's a fucking good one. Anyway, thank you for listening, guys. Thank you for watching. Go the Swans in the grand final. We'll catch you all next week.
See you later, guys.